Control rarely enters our lives loudly. It doesn't arrive announcing itself as a problem. It doesn't feel destructive at first. In fact, it often feels like maturity. Control begins as a strategy, a way to reduce uncertainty, a way to protect ourselves from disappointment, a way to believe that if we think hard enough, plan carefully enough, and act decisively enough, life will cooperate. At some point, most people are praised for this behavior. They're called responsible, driven, disciplined. But beneath the surface, something subtle is already forming, a tension between what is and what should be. And that tension, once internalized, never stays quiet. When control turns inward. The moment life diverges from expectation, control shifts direction. Instead of trying to manage circumstances, we begin to manage ourselves aggressively. We analyze every decision, revisit every mistake, replay every conversation. The mind becomes a courtroom where the self is both prosecutor and defendant. Why didn't I see this coming? I should have known better. If only I had chosen differently. This is not reflection. It is rumination disguised as responsibility. And rumination feeds on one assumption: everything could have been prevented. The psychological weight of should. Few words are heavier than should. I should be further ahead. I should be happier. I shouldn't feel this way. Should implies deviation from a correct timeline. But whose timeline? Rarely our own. Most expectations are inherited from family, from culture, from comparison, from invisible benchmarks no one agreed on consciously. Control thrives on these invisible standards. It convinces us that life is late, wrong, or insufficient, and that we are failing to manage it properly. This belief does not motivate. It drains. Why the mind clings to control. The human nervous system is not optimized for uncertainty. Unpredictability triggers threat responses. The unknown activates anxiety. Control becomes a coping mechanism. If I can predict, I can prepare. If I can prepare, I can avoid pain. If I can avoid pain, I can stay safe. But safety, when taken to extremes, becomes stagnation. Life is not meant to be risk-free. It is meant to be engaged. Control tries to sterilize experience, and in doing so, it removes depth. The invisible cost. The cost of control is not immediate catastrophe. It is gradual disconnection. You begin to live slightly ahead of yourself, always preparing, always anticipating, always bracing. Moments pass but are never fully inhabited. Joy feels conditional. Rest feels undeserved. Peace feels temporary. Because control never finishes its work, there is always one more variable to manage. A quiet realization. Eventually, a realization emerges, often after exhaustion, not insight. I'm doing everything right. Why does this still feel heavy? This question is not a failure. It is the beginning of wisdom. Because heaviness does not come from effort. It comes from resistance. And resistance, once seen clearly, can no longer pretend to be strength. At a certain point, control stops being a strategy and becomes an identity. This is where it grows dangerous. When control is only a tool, it can be set down. When it becomes identity, it cannot. The person no longer says, "I like to plan." They say, "I am someone who must have things figured out." This shift is subtle, but decisive. Because now, uncertainty is no longer inconvenient, it is threatening. The self built on predictability. Modern identity is often constructed around competence, being capable, being prepared, being reliable. These qualities are not wrong, but when the sense of self depends on predictability, life becomes fragile. Anything unexpected feels like exposure. A delayed outcome feels like failure. A surprise feels like loss of control. A pause feels like falling behind. The person begins to equate worth with management. If I am in control, I am valuable. If I am not, I am failing. This equation is never spoken aloud, but it governs behavior quietly. Why uncertainty feels personal? Uncertainty is neutral by nature. It does not judge, it does not accuse, it does not target individuals. But to a control-based identity, uncertainty feels personal. It feels like an interruption, like disrespect, like proof that something has gone wrong. This is why people often react emotionally to situations they logically understand are uncontrollable. They are not reacting to the event, they are reacting to the threat it poses to their sense of self. Control and the fear of being seen. Control also serves another function. It hides vulnerability. Plans act as armor. Schedules act as shields. Certainty acts as camouflage. But vulnerability cannot be eliminated, only postponed. Eventually, reality bypasses preparation. And when it does, the collapse feels disproportionate. Not because the event is unbearable, but because the identity was brittle. The exhaustion of constant readiness. Living in control means living in anticipation, always scanning, always adjusting, always correcting. This creates a low-grade exhaustion that is often mistaken for adulthood. But constant readiness is not maturity, it is hypervigilance. The nervous system remains slightly activated even in moments of rest. Relaxation feels unsafe. Stillness feels irresponsible. Silence feels like neglect. The body never receives the signal that it can fully stand down. When life refuses to cooperate. At some point, life introduces an event that cannot be managed. Loss, illness, change, a door that does not reopen. In these moments, control offers no answers, and without answers, the identity fractures. People often describe these periods as losing themselves. What they are losing is not the self, but the illusion that the self was built on. A necessary unraveling. The unraveling of control feels like failure, but philosophically, it is initiation. It forces a confrontation with a deeper truth. The self was never meant to be rigid. Flexibility is not weakness. Adaptation is not surrender. Uncertainty is not collapse. The Stoics understood this. They trained the mind not to dominate outcomes, but to remain intact when outcomes changed. The first crack in the armor. The first crack is not dramatic. It often appears as fatigue, a quiet thought, I can't keep doing this. This is not laziness, it is wisdom knocking. There is a moment, often quiet, sometimes devastating, when control finally breaks. Not because the person stops trying, but because reality refuses to be managed any longer. This moment does not announce itself as philosophy, it arrives as disruption. A loss that cannot be reversed, a failure that cannot be reframed, a change that does not ask permission. For a control-based identity, this feels like free fall. The illusion reveals itself. Control never actually prevented suffering, it only delayed the recognition of it. Plans postponed uncertainty. Predictions created the appearance of safety. When that appearance collapses, what remains feels raw. But raw does not mean ruined. What remains is not emptiness. It is responsiveness. Without rigid expectations, the mind becomes flexible. Without attachment to outcome, attention sharpens. Without constant prediction, presence deepens. Life becomes a conversation, not a battle. Agency is not removed, it is relocated. Effort regains dignity. Action regains clarity. Peace is no longer the absence of difficulty, it is the absence of resistance. This is where Stoicism and Taoism meet. Amor fati, wu wei. Action remains, struggle dissolves. Control promised safety, acceptance offers stability. And stability, unlike control, does not shatter when life changes. This is not the end of effort. It is the end of unnecessary struggle. And in that ending, something essential begins.